All right, Redux is in place. We are now going to uh, go to the proper authentication part using two useful Firebase functions to sign up and signing the user. So first thing first, we do need a form to collect the user's credential. So that's what we are going to do now. We have a submit function, and this function just stop the propagation of the event, so no other components of in the app will receive the submit event. And then for each field, we will call the same function, and this function will pass along the name of the field with the new value. And once it's done, we should have a functional form now. All right, so now the action is connected to our form. So what we want is to call the actual Firebase function in order to create the user in the Firebase authentication. So here you are seeing the Firebase documentation and how to start a project. So the part that is interesting for us is how to install the actual package. So it's simply called Firebase, and you just have to install it like any other package. And then the next step will be to configure the instance of Firebase that we are currently installing. So in order to configure the instance, we need to tell Firebase which project we are working with. And so first we are going to indicate which provider we need. So here we just want to allow the user to log in with their email and password. And now we are going to fetch the configuration information to let Firebase know which application we are using. So here I'm just creating a new web application. Note that for iOS and Android, it would be the same ID, but obviously the code would be a bit different. So right away, they are giving all the information required to connect to Firebase from the front-end application. So all of this is public. You can include it in your code and in your repository. If you ever need to go back to it, you just need to go to the settings of the project, and you're good to go. So here we are creating a new file in the state manager, and the initialize app function is the configuration part. Once it's done, if there is no error, and we can see that there is no error here, we can just import Firebase wherever we need it in the code, and the same instance will be used. So Firebase has a very useful function called create user with email and password, which literally does what we want here. And as you can see, when we call this function, what is returned is the authentication data of the user. So what we are going to do here is simply to collect those information and store them in Redux so we can access them from somewhere else. Now, once the user is signed up, what we want to do is actually make sure that they are redirected to the homepage, and that if they are not signing, well, then they won't access the homepage, right? So we just changed the router configuration there, and we display the components depending on if there is authentication data or not, right? So now what we need here is once the form has been submitted, if no error has been triggered, we are going to reroute the user to the home page. So that's what we are doing here. And you will see that if you create a new user, right, so small note here, by default, the password in Firebase has to be minimum 6 characters, which was the error that we saw here. Okay, so I'm pausing the video here because this is very, very important. When the user signing or sign up in the application, Firebase will create a local storage object with the authentication information. This local storage object will be stored permanently, and you can change this behavior if you want to, but by default on web, that's how it works. The problem is, if you refresh the page, for example, the local storage will still be there, but Redux will not be aware of it. So what we need is actually a way to load the information from the local storage at the very beginning when our application is loaded. So Redux can know that the user is already authenticated and then redirect them to the correct page, like the home page, for example. This could be a bit tedious to do. Fortunately, Firebase has a built-in function, or rather an event, a listener called onAuthChanged. And this listener will execute a function whenever the authentication state is changed. So when the user becomes authenticated, or when it's not authenticated anymore. The trick here is that this listener is also triggered when the page is loaded and that the Firebase package realizes that there is already a local storage object with some kind of valid Firebase authentication data. What it means is that whether it is to sign up the user, to sign in the user, to sign out the user, or to just handle the page refresh, this one listener will take care of all those situations and update the Redux state. So as usual, I'm trying to show you how to find the information regarding this listener in the documentation. It's quite straightforward. You just have to copy paste the example given in the docs. And since we need to update the Redux state, we are going to create a new action. And this new action, we'll call it from the main app component. So every time the app component loads, it's going to trigger this action, and this action, the only thing that this action is doing is to implement the listener itself. So just to try it out, like here we have removed the dispatcher from the sign up action. If you can see it here, like we are not updating Redux from the action directly. We are just signing up the user, and then the auth authentication state changes, which then call the Firebase listener, which is pretty cool. And now, out of the box, what you see is that when you reload the page, well, the user is already authenticated, and so it's directly directed to the page. If we remove the call to this action, when we reload the page, nothing is done, and they are stuck on the signing page. So now we have handled all the cases. All right, so we are almost there. And now we are going to reuse the same form, and this time to sign the user in. So really, it's a matter of creating a new action, and then just instead of calling the create user function here, we're going to use signing with email and password. So it's extremely similar. And then we change the dispatcher in the sign-in component. And just so I can test it, I will reuse one of the email address I have created before. And then here I'm reusing the address and the password, and it's working. So another out-of-the-box tool from Firebase is to give you the right errors directly. So here I'm just adding a red span in the code just to display the errors and show you. So the first situation is if the user does not exist, essentially. And if we try to log in, well, Firebase tells you, hey, there is no user with this email address. And then if you try a user that exists, but if we type the wrong password, the error would change, and now you have access to it. And there you go. We have it. Once all the Redux is in place, really, some Firebase authentication is simply a matter of calling some predefined function that are doing all the work for you.